Welcome everybody, welcome all our Torah Anytime viewers. Tonight we're going to learn Refuah Shlema for Dalia Naomi bat Zakia, Yehuda ben Roz, Karen bat Rachel, Yosef ben Rosa, and also Miriam Chaya bat Bracha. And please, for whoever is listening over here and whoever is watching, I'm sure you have heard about Miriam Chaya bat Bracha. I know the family personally, and they really need a lot of prayers. So please, if you're listening to this shiur, if you're in the room over here, please, when you come home, say a little bit of Tehillim. They need as much, all the Tehillim as possible. Tonight, we are going to, the topic that we're going to speak tonight is going to be about rebuke, which means tochacha. There is the reason what this, or AKA criticism. Now, the reason why this has been a topic that has been a long time coming that I wanted to bring, and I kept on pushing it off, and lately certain things happened that just pushed me over the top and be like, okay, I have to do it. And I'll tell you what one other thing was, is that recently I was speaking to one of the guys in one of my classes, and I've been speaking to him for quite some time. You have to, about Shabbat. And I was going hard on him. If you don't keep Shabbat, I was going, it's worse than a murder. And I was going literally on all the sources on how bad it is if you don't keep Shabbat. And he's like, oh, okay. And you can see slowly getting softer, week after week of him hearing that. Eventually it's going to dig in. Then he comes to me one day, he comes to class, and he's like, Rabbi, he's like, no offense, but I found a rabbi I like better than you. So I'm like, all right. Baruch Hashem, I'm very happy for that, as long as you found. So I'm like, what made you like better? What was the thing that made you like him better than me? So he said, I asked him, says, is it so important, the Shabbat and all the things that I have to do? Is that really so important? It's really difficult for me. So the rabbi, which whoever is just listening to this, I'm doing air quotes, rabbi. I don't know if he had a beard and that's why he called him rabbi. But he said, no, listen, Shabbat is important, but if you can't do it, it's okay. You do whatever you can do, and God loves you, and does that, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. So he's saying all of a sudden, oh, I don't have to keep Shabbat. So this got me really, really upset because first of all, to be honest, I don't think this guy is a rabbi. He probably had a beard and he thought he was a rabbi and he just asked him that because I can't imagine a rabbi actually saying that. It makes absolutely no sense. Well, again, so then he probably also wouldn't have a beard and he'd probably be a woman. So, but at the same time, whatever it was, is not a real. It doesn't sound like a real rabbi to me. Now, there was, and this also is going to explain. You have some rabbis that they say, no, this rabbi is a fanatic, this rabbi is crazy, he's too harsh, he's too strict. So when we're going to see over here what we're going to be learning, you're going to see, things that are, a lot different than the way that the average people think of it. And in fact, most people think when it comes to rebuke, they don't understand it. They think that you don't need to do it. I think this is such a misunderstood concept in Judaism nowadays that I feel it's a very, very important topic to speak about. And additionally, we're going to speak about a few things. Also, you have to know how to rebuke somebody. If you think that you have an obligation to rebuke somebody, and you need to, you want to rebuke them, but if you do it the wrong way, you could be doing more damage than good. And there's one other thing that made me, this is the thing that pushed me over the top, and I was like, okay, now I have to give the class, was I was listening to someone speak, and he was speaking about marriage and about, how you're supposed to deal with your spouse. And one of the things that he mentioned was that you're not allowed to rebuke your spouse. Whatever it is, you got to accept them for the way it is. So I really wanted to ask a question, but you know what, I had respect. I didn't want to say anything, but it got me very, 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 very upset. What does that mean? I'm like,
is that true?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I was thinking that also.
Absolutely not. But it depends. First of all, when it comes to your spouse, when it comes to marriage, you have to tread so carefully. You're walking. It's like a ticking time bomb when you're dealing with criticism and marriage. But there's two things over here. There's criticism where like some guy is shaking his foot so much and he's shaking the whole table, and you're like, enough of you already. Come on. Why are you licking your, some people get annoyed with like the stupidest things. I'm not talking about that criticism. I'm not talking about that type of rebuke. I'm talking about halakha, which means is if someone's doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, you have an obligation to rebuke them. If your spouse is doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, you have an obligation to rebuke them. There is no, and I was shocked. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. I went and I asked my rabbi. And I'm like, is there a heter? Is there something I don't know in the Torah that says that if your spouse, I think the words was you're not allowed to rebuke them? And this rabbi said, I never heard of that, and no, it doesn't exist. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, what's the thing? What I think it was a misunderstanding. What he really meant is that you cannot criticize somebody based on things that you don't like. But if it comes to halakha, you have an obligation. We're soon going to see. So that pushed me over the top. That decided. But But once we're dealing with criticism, there are certain people that like to dish it out. They have a pocket full of criticism for everybody. So, so to start off, this a little story I think brings the point out very nicely. Is that there was once a father, a son, and they had a donkey, and they were walking down the road, and the father was on the donkey, the son was right next to the father, and they're walking. Meanwhile, the father, passes by a bystander, and he overhears a bystander telling another person, says, look at this father. He's making that poor boy walk while he's able to go and ride the donkey. So the father hears this, and he's like, you know what? All right, I don't want people to start talking. He gets off the donkey, puts his son on the donkey, walks a little bit more. He walks a little bit more, and he passes by another bystander. And this other bystander says, look at this boy. He's making his poor father walk. What a fool. Father heard this and says, all right, what am I supposed to do now? So the father and the boy go sit on the donkey, and they keep on. Now again, no one's going to be able to say anything. They walk a little bit more. Suddenly another guy goes and passes by, and he says, look at this poor donkey. 2 people have to sit on this donkey. So the father says, what do we do? Both the father and the son now go off the donkey, and they keep on walking. They pass by somebody else, and the guy says, oh, what a foolish family. Says they have a donkey, not even one person is sitting on the donkey. So the idea is that sometimes when it comes to criticism, someone's always going to be able to find something. Now, I'm not talking about that. We're talking about halakha. Halakha is it's either you're allowed to or you're not allowed to. Granted, there are certain things that are minhag, but we're talking about specifically halakha. So now the things that I would like to B'ezrat Hashem cover today, and we do have a limited time, so we'll see how much we'll be able to cover. But these are the topics and ideas that I want to cover. Number 1, do we have an obligation to rebuke? Is it exist nowadays? Very good. Do we have? Now this also is that there's many people that criticize, and many people that get criticized. But how many of those people are actually getting productive criticism and are able to accept it? Next is we're going to speak about also how you need to rebuke somebody. What is the process? How do you just do it? Also, we'll speak about how to accept criticism. And this is a very important thing, is that what happens if you do the same sin sometimes? Do you have the obligation to rebuke somebody else if you sometimes mess up in the same thing? So the next question is we're going to deal with is, do you have to rebuke everybody? You see somebody in the street driving on Shabbat, do you start running after them throwing rocks? There's a certain sect that do that in Israel that's 100% not according to halakha. But do you need to rebuke everybody? Who do you need to rebuke? And next thing is, can you rebuke publicly? And lastly, I want to speak about is how do you know you have a good rabbi? How do you know that your rabbi is a good rabbi or is one of those yes men? Okay. So now we'll start off with an obligation. Now the obligation over here is not something that, they think, okay, it's rabbinical. There's a pasuk in the Torah, in Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17. It says, "V'lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha." Do not hate your brother in your heart. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. Rebuke, you shall rebuke your amitecha. Amitecha is something we're going to have to translate it. Right now we'll translate it as friend, but it doesn't mean friend. It means something else.
Nation?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean, it means, the actual translation is someone like you, but we'll have to explain that. And then it finishes off the pasuk, V'lo tisa alav chet. So now, we see over here, there's a pasuk mifuash in the Torah. There's a pasuk in the Torah that says you have an obligation to rebuke. So right away over here, that should stop. And by the way, it doesn't, there are certain things that only exist, let's say, in time of the Bet HaMikdash. You look at the Sefer HaChinuch, which what I have over here, it's an obligation of the mitzvah that actually applies today. It's not something like, only in the olden days we used to. It's actually an obligation we have today. And in fact, there's a Gemara. I'm going to give you, today we're going to do a lot of sources. I'm going to source it in. Why? Because I think that people don't understand it, and they think I'm going to maybe making it up. I guarantee you people don't know what I'm going to say. So I'm going to source everything that you'll be able, whoever's listening, whoever's watching, you could go and look inside and actually see what I'm saying. And, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. So there's a Gemara in Shabbat, page 54, that says that whoever, if he has a household and someone sins in his household and he has the ability to say something to prevent that person from sinning and he doesn't, he gets part of that sin. And it goes on further. It says if, let's say, you're powerful enough that you have the ability to prevent people from sinning from your whole city and you don't say anything and they sin, you get part of that sin. And even more so, if let's say someone's so powerful that he has the ability to prevent somebody from sinning from the whole world and you don't, you get part of that sin. And this is, by the way, it's not only in the Gemara, it's also in Talmud Yerushalmi in Shabbat, in the 5th chapter. The Ramah brings it down, Sharei Tshuva brings it down. They all bring down the same things, that if you have that ability to rebuke somebody, and you don't rebuke somebody, and that person goes and does the sin, you get part of that sin. Now this right here...
But what if you said and they still didn't.
Well, we'll speak about that. First of all, that right away you're in a good standing. That's why there's Rav Chaim Sofer in Shalai Chaim. He brings down. He says, woe to the day of judgment. After 120, when we get up to heaven, you have to give a judgment, and there's going to be a righteous man over there, and they say this righteous man, he didn't keep Shabbat. And everyone's going to be like, what are you talking about? This guy's such a righteous man. The next righteous man comes up, says this righteous man, he slept with a married woman. And everyone's going to be like, what are you talking about? Slept with a married woman? The next righteous man, this man didn't keep kosher. I'll be like, well, this guy was so careful in his kosher. And he says, if you had the ability to stop someone, prevent someone from sinning, and you didn't, you get that sin. You get part of that sin. Now, I don't want that. So, number one, I'm not even enjoying that sin. It's like you're doing that sin. I'm gonna take a hit for that sin. Says not in my watch. This is why it comes. There's no in Judaism. It doesn't. The notion of live and let live doesn't exist. The famous story about it is the ship. There's a very famous story. You have a ship, and there's one guy. He has a small room in the bottom. And all of a sudden they hear banging coming out of his room. So one of the sailors opened up, they go inside and they see that he's taking an axe and he's literally breaking the floorboards. So the sailor's like, yo dude, what's up with what are you doing? So the sailors are happy. So so he goes and he says, could you please mind your own business? This is my room. Can you please close the door and let me do what I need to do in my room? And they're like, and he keeps on just chopping the wood. And suddenly the passengers come by and be like, what are you doing? And he's like, you guys mind your own business. It's in my room. And they're all going, they're like, fool, if you sink your room, the whole ship goes down. If water starts coming here, it's not just your room that's going down. We're all in it together. And that's how we are in Judaism. Judaism, we're all in here together. If some guy in China sins, it affects me. If some guy in China, I'm talking about a Jew, that does a mitzvah, it affects me as well. So I have an obligation for my fellow brothers and sisters that they make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if not, then it affects me also. It's not just like, mind your own business. There's no such thing as mind your own business. Well, there is in a certain sense. But when it comes to I'm saying, peeking everyone's windows and be like, are you sinning? Yeah. So I'm saying still, everyone has a privacy. But if you know of something that's happening, you have an obligation to actually rebuke it. Okay. Yes, please.
Let's say they say you're stood goody good, like shut up, no one asked you.
Yeah.
They scream at you or something.
So there is actually, and I'm trying to remember the source for it, but it says that the more that they laugh at you, the greater that your reward is.
Oh wow. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I know what to do.
Yeah. All right, good. So, but that's ideal. Okay. Anyways, the Gemara in Tamid 28a says that one should love rebuke. Because as long as there's a rebuke in the world, goodness and blessing come to the world, and evil departs the world. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Next, there is a Gemara in Sukkah, 29b, that says, we're going to do a lot of quotes for the next 2-3 minutes, so bear with me. Sukkah 29b, it says, one of the things that causes the property of people that own households to be taken away by the government is because they had the ability to rebuke and they did not. There's a Midrash in Echad, that says, that there was times that the great people of Israel, they looked away when other people were sinning. God says, there will come a time where I too will look away. And we see in Gemara in Shabbat, page 119, that Yerushalayim was not destroyed only because that people had the ability to rebuke and they did not rebuke one another. And there's a Gemara in Ketubot, page 105b, that says, let's say you have a Talmudic scholar, a rabbi, that everybody loves him, know that there's something wrong with that rabbi. What's wrong with that? Because why is he not giving rebuke? Why is everybody loving him? There's something wrong with that. A rabbi has the obligation to give rebuke to his congregation. And if he doesn't give rebuke to the congregation, so what is he there for? What is he actually, one of the main things that he needs to do is put people on the right path. And if someone's doing something wrong and he's not doing it, of course everyone's going to like him. He's getting a nice fat paycheck from the committee. And that's a big problem. There is also, it also says in Tanat Ve'eliyahu, that says that anybody who knows how to admonish, give rebuke, and rebukes the public, brings content to his creator. The Rambam in Ilchot Teshuvah, chapter 4, says that there are certain sins that are so bad that if you commit them, God doesn't give you the ability, the help to do teshuvah. And one of them is for people that are able to give rebuke and they do not give rebuke. There's also the Chidah brings down from Medrash Tanchuma, he brings it down in Parshat Noach, I believe, that says that in the time of the generation of Noach, they had people that were upright, they were decent people, but they didn't get saved. Only Noach got saved. You know why? Because Noach was the only one who rebuked anybody else. Even though they were upright people, they didn't rebuke them. Because of that, they got destroyed. The Zohar, this is a good one. The Zohar says like this. It says the angel of death does not have the same power over a man who is zealous for Hashem as he is over other men. So if somebody has the ability to be zealous for God and to give rebuke, he has protection, like special protection going on. There's one sefer that we're going to quote quite a lot over here, is the Kaveh Yashar. I'm a very, very. It's an amazing sefer. If you're able to read it, it's Kabbalistic, but it's Musar. It's an unbelievable sefer to read. The Kav Yashar in chapter 101, he brings 4 benefits for giving rebuke. Number 1, he says that the world is always. You should always think of the world as exactly 50-50. Which means is that if you go and you're going to go do make a bracha now, you do one mitzvah right now, the whole world just turned into merit, that it's meritorious. If you're about to do something and you do a sin, the whole world tilts it. So what happens is if you're going and you're giving someone rebuke, know that you just changed the whole world and it's going to become meritorious now. Additionally, the second reason he gives, it says that, first of all, very simple. You're fulfilling an obligation of, you're rebuking your friend, and that's an obligation. You're fulfilling a mitzvah. Third, and he gets a little bit more Kabbalistic now, he says that, because you cause the honor of Hashem to be elevated, the reward for that is that you will merit children and grandchildren who are God-fearing and whole in their character. Does anybody here not want that? I mean, I know I want that. This is like, talking about a skula. This is a skula. You want to, and he goes even more. He says after his death, this person that gave rebuke, the 4th reason he gives, he says you go through 13 gates and nobody's going to object. Then there's going to be a certain angel that he says that he's appointed over the souls that issue rebuke to other people for the benefit of heaven. And he goes, and this soul goes, and he brings it before God, and he goes and he gives, this soul gets the reward that Avraham Avinu got for doing kiruv, because he did. It says, this is what happens when you talk when you have a candy in your mouth. I'm sorry, but I need the candy because of my throat. All the souls that he made in Haran. You know what? So he made the souls, he gets that same reward. And furthermore, he says after that, he gives them 70 worlds in the next world that nobody's allowed to go in unless the people that only benefited the public through the rebuke. Imagine I tell somebody, it says if you go, you see that person over there across the street, go and tell them they're not allowed to smoke on Shabbat. Just, go tell them whatever, give them some rebuke. And the guy says, and I tell him, if you do that, there's a certain building on Broadway in Manhattan, you're as free and clear. No, it's you just do that, you're going to do it. Who's going to, he's like, I'll go door to door and telling people to keep Shabbat for every building. What are you kidding me? I'm talking 70 worlds, not one building, worlds. You know what worlds is in the next world? 70 worlds you have access to if you do the right thing. If you have the ability to rebuke and you give the rebuke, unbelievable reward. Obviously, Rav Nassan also says, and also Menorat HaMaor brings it down also, that says that one who brings merit to many, God himself watches over him and his children, and he merits that his children are righteous. Seva HaChasidim also brings down that one who brings merit to many, then even if, let's say, his time, he was supposed to live till 90, he's 90 years old now, but because he's helping so many people, God says, you know what? I'm going to keep this guy around a little bit more. I'm going to keep this lady around a little bit more because she's just helping so many people. This should already sold. I could stop right now, and you could be sold already, go on your mission to rebuke. Yes, questions?
I just wanted to know, is there a time when to rebuke, and you can't always rebuke? And
yeah, we're going to speak about it.
Different things that come in. It's not like just rebuke. Sometimes when you rebuke, you could turn the person the other way. But I just want to ask you just a quick thing. Last year there was a girl who was eating non-kosher, and she was fully non-kosher. She knew it was wrong, and so I encouraged her, and I bought her kosher food, and really, really helped her. And then she got very annoyed at me that I was brainwashing her, and she didn't want to talk to me ever again, and turned her off.
You did good.
Really?
Yeah.
Of course.
If you did what you're supposed to do, and we're going to speak about how to rebuke. As long
it was in a very not hard way. She just
yes.
was very upset. She never talked to me ever again. Is that
excellent? Not excellent that she didn't speak to you again, but excellent the fact of what you did. You gave rebuke. But we're going to speak about it. I'm going to give you the idea of how to give rebuke. We're going to go through all that. Bezrat Hashem. Yeah.
With that student, I'm like that. I don't like when people come up to me oh, you're not eating kosher? Okay, you have to eat certain kosher. Don't tell me what to do. I just imagine she came to our schools to speak, and I like when they do it in a twisty turny way. They don't automatically say, oh,
which we're going to bring that also. I'm going to speak about that also.
Story and then oh, you have to start.
Yeah.
Okay, now I understand.
Not
just form
Right. We're going to speak about all that. We're going to speak about all that, how to do it, exactly how to do it. We'll go through all the Bezrat Hashem. We'll go through all those details and exactly how to do it. You also had a question? Okay. Yeah, all the questions Bezrat Hashem will be answered.
Potentially backfire is my question.
Yeah. So we'll all those questions Bezrat Hashem will be answered. So
if somebody gets annoyed at you afterwards, it doesn't matter.
Oh, we'll soon see. Yeah. So the Rabbi Yonasan Eibshit says like this. It says that some people think that who has to give rebuke? The rabbis have to give rebuke. What is a simple person like me going to start screaming at other people? Come on, The rabbi should rebuke. Rabbi Yonasan says, no, just the opposite. Because if you're a simple person, that's the perfect person to give rebuke. Because what happens? Let's say you have a friend. And so if a rabbi goes to a friend and says, listen, you have to start keeping kosher. So the friend says, you know what? It's easy for you. You're a rabbi. This is what you do. This is what you deal with. Okay, it's easy for you. But let's say you have a friend. And you go to your friend and be like, no, we're just like, we're the same. We went to the same school. We have the same friends. And he says, I'm doing it. Now, so could you do it? The rebuke goes a lot further. The rebuke goes a lot further when it's somebody that's like the same as you and telling you, like you could do it the same way. That's why it says in Pirkei Avot, it says, Aseh lecha rav, it says you should make yourself a rabbi, ukneh lecha chaver, and buy yourself a friend. Because friends are so important. I say this all the time. People ask very often questions, where should I send my kids to school? To which yeshiva? So it's true, it's a very good question. But one of the most important things that, in my personal opinion, that factors out what the child is going to grow up to be is who he hangs around with. What type of clique of friends do they have? You have somebody that's going to go and, let's say, they sit and they watch movies all day and play video games. Guess what? That boy is going to he's going to turn into a girl, whatever it is, going to turn into somebody that plays video games and watches movies all day. If you have one kid and you put in a clique of kids that are just a bunch of potheads, guess what? He could have hated smoking, but within 3 months, he's a pothead also. And it depends. If you have the group of kids that are always speaking about Torah and this, they're having a good time, but they throw a little bit over here, Torah, then you know what? This kid is going to end up becoming like that kid. So your friends are so important. It depends who you are is who you hang around with. So, and that's why it says also, what is a chaver tov? What is a good friend? A good friend, and it says also, Rabbi Ovadia Bartanua brings it down. Kavayasha on the 5th chapter also brings it down. It says a good friend is a friend that gives rebuke. A friend that actually gives a rebuke. That's how you know somebody loves you? If he's able to go or she's able to go to you and say, you know what, you're doing something wrong. I had somebody, I had a close friend of mine that one time we were driving back from Lakewood. And is there going to come with a tip or something like that? Like, there's a professional over here.
Oh,
No, I'm good, honey. I'm not going to sleep for the next week, no. So, there is actually, if I can't bother you for tea the next time you go, not now, the next time you go, I forgot. All right, I shouldn't have said that. I feel like it's going to be easier to speak than with having all the.
Now I get like the bigger mitzvahs, I got so much quicker.
Thank you. She's right. Question is, should I have said that? Because now she's not. Okay, whatever. So, anyways. So we were driving back from Lakewood. Me and I had a very close friend of mine. I don't remember why we were there, and I don't remember the context of the conversation. But all I remember, and Lakewood, so you're talking about you think about it from Deal. So you're talking about an hour and a half to 2 hour drive. Mm-hmm. The entire drive, he was giving me mussar.
That's awesome.
And now you could say, so back then I wanted to open the car and kick him out, or not. I didn't even say stop driving. Just open the car and kick him out. That's how I felt at that point in time. But you know what? He kept on going, and I was like, I even said enough already, and he didn't stop. He kept on going and going and going and going.
Like it was personal. Do you have to do this?
Yeah. Oh, very personal.
Oh my goodness.
So, and to be honest, I don't remember what it was about. I didn't remember what it's about. But anyways, at the end of the drive, I went up to him and I said, thank you. He says, you know what? You're right. At the end of the day, you were right. And he said, that's how I know I had a good friend. I had a good friend that was willing to go. No one feels happy to be like, hey, you're doing something wrong. That's the most awkward, annoying conversation to have. I've had that with people. It's so, it's so annoying. It's so awkward. It's something that nobody wants to deal with. But you have an obligation. And if you're a good friend, you will do that. Because if you really care for that person, you will set them on the right path. The idea is I want to discuss now two things. Now, first of all, the question is, how much does someone need to rebuke? I think somebody asked over here, let's say you rebuke him once or her once. Is that good enough? Are you good? Let's say you rebuke them, and you say, listen, you're not allowed to eat non-kosher food. And she continues eating the shrimp. And do you have to continue rebuking and say it again and again and again and again? Or one time is enough? Also, there's an interesting question, is how come we don't make a bracha? How come we don't make a bracha? You make a bracha when you eat matzah. You make a bracha when you shake a lulav. Why don't you make a bracha when you give rebuke? We said it's a mitzvah from the Torah that you have to give rebuke. We should make. You're thinking that I'm going to start annoying my friend. Thank you very much. I'm going to start annoying my friend with giving him rebuke. You get all into it. Why don't we do that? Why is there no blessing for rebuke?
It's a hard thing to do.
It is a hard thing. Thank you, and may you be blessed more and more.
Amen. Everyone as well.
Amen. Okay. Oh, it's delicious. Okay. So so there's a Gemara in Eochin, 16b, that asks a question like this. It says, to what extent does one have to give rebuke? And they give three answers, and I'll give you all three of them. The first answer, Rav says, He says, you know how much you have to give rebuke? You give rebuke, and you give rebuke until the person who is sinning, and if he didn't listen and he's keep on sinning again, he's ready to hit you. When he's ready to hit you, then you know, okay, now you can stop. That's what answer number one. Answer number two, says Shmuel, it says you have to give rebuke until the person who's sinning is ready to curse you out. Then a little bit less, then you know you're okay.
Oh my God.
Answer number three, Rabbi Yochanan says that you have to give rebuke until the transgressor, the person who's sinning, gets angry. That's when you know you have to stop. So that's what the Gemara says. Now, what's the actual halakha? What is the actual halakha? You look in the Ramah, and the Be'er halakha brings it down. It says no, it goes a little bit lenient. It doesn't actually mean that the guy has to about to hit you, but when he's coming close to hit you, that's when you know you have to stop. That was the lenient one. The Mishnah Berurah says no. It says he goes even a little bit more lenient. It says no until the person's ready to curse you out. So which means is, this is not something like a fanatic. This is actual the halakha. That you have an obligation, which means is, it says hocheach tochiach. It says it twice. Why twice? Rebuke, you shall rebuke. Because you know what? If he doesn't listen the first time, you rebuke again and again and again and again. Now, that doesn't mean you sit in front of the person and be like, you keep Shabbat? And be like, no. All right. Keep Shabbat. All right? Because then they'll slap you very fast. And that's not productive at all. But you do actually have to give rebuke. And if it doesn't work, you have to keep on giving rebuke. Yeah, it has to. And eventually, either they're going to be fed up and they're going to say, get upset. And then you're okay. Or they're going to say, you know what? I guess you're right. But it has to be done the right way, and this is the important part. So now the question is how do we rebuke? Why do we rebuke? First, before we do that, I have to go why to rebuke. So you may think, why I need to rebuke somebody else? I have a mitzvah from God. You have a mitzvah from God. If I'm doing it and you're not doing it, then I have to be God's policeman, and I have to make sure that you're doing it. That's what you might think that it is. Says the Rambam in Ilchot Te'el, chapter 6. He says that, how should someone rebuke him? First, when you go to rebuke somebody, you rebuke them privately. You go very privately, very gently and calmly, and in a very, very loving manner. And you're saying, I'm doing this only for your benefit, and I really love you, and I care about you, and that's why I'm saying these things. And by the way, he says also, the Rambam also brings down, he says, and if you have the ability to rebuke and you didn't, you get part of that sin as well. But he says, the idea of rebuke is like tzedakah. It's like chesed. The idea is that when just like you have to go and you visit the sick and you give charity, so too, same idea, you have the obligation of rebuke. He says, you know why we don't embarrass somebody in public to rebuke them? Because if you're embarrassing him in public, then that's not chesed anymore. That's not chesed. Chesed is something that you have to do it for his benefit. And this is also a reason why we don't make a bracha. We're going to answer this question. You know why you don't make a bracha before you give me a rebuke? For what mitzvot do you make bracha? You make mitzvot for bracha between you and God. Between you and God, you make a brachot. Between you and man, you don't make another. You don't make a bracha when you give charity. You don't make a bracha. Between you and God, you make a bracha. Between you and man, you don't have to. This mitzvah over here is not between you and it's not between you and God. Which means if it was between you and God, the obligation of rebuke, then you would have to make a bracha, and you would have to. There's an idea also behind it. It's called ased dochel lo taseh, which means is if let's say you have a positive commandment and you have a negative commandment, the positive and they both are the same thing. The positive commandment override the negative commandment, and you do the positive commandment. So over here, it is an example in this case. Is let's say you have an obligation to rebuke somebody, but he's going to get embarrassed in public. So the rebuking somebody is a positive commandment. The embarrassing in public is a negative commandment. The positive commandment overrides the negative commandment, and you would actually have to go and rebuke him. But that's not the case. Why? Because this obligation is not between me and God. It's between me and my friend. It says, I'm doing it out of chesed. I'm doing it out of love. I'm not God's policeman. That's not why I'm rebuking it. You know why I'm rebuking this person? Because I love you and I care about you, and it's chesed. And that's why I'm doing it. That's why you don't make a bracha on it. The Rambam says this why. He explains that if the person's ready to curse you or hit you, it's not chesed anymore. That's it. It's over already, because it's turning into something more aggressive, and you're not doing the right way, and it's not working. So you stop. Cease and desist. So this also answers a question that people ask, because there's two Gemarot. There's a Gemara in Yuma, page 9b, that says the second Bet HaMikdash was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. Then there's also a Gemara in Shabbat, page 119b, that says the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed because one person didn't rebuke the other person. So the question is, which one is it? And the answer is, it's both one of the same. Because the rebuke, what's baseless hatred? If you hate somebody for no reason, how could you give that person a rebuke? That means you don't love that person. Rebuke comes out of love. So it's one of the same. They didn't rebuke other people because they had the baseless hatred. That's why it's the same thing. That's why the Bet HaMikdash was actually destroyed. And this is why it's so important. The way that you give rebuke, you have to do it in a nice way. It has to be the most nice and gentle way possible. And in fact, that's why it says in Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 29, verse 4, it says, "Vayomer lahem Yaakov achai me'ainatem ve'yomu mechan anachnu. Yaakov was going and he was giving rebuke to a bunch of shepherds that were hanging around. They came around early. How did he give rebuke? He says, "Achai, my brothers, what's going on?" Right? You know how like I get this all the time. They're like, hey, my brother, what's going on? Or if you're in Hebrew, it's hey, achi manishmas, baba, achi, everything is achi, my brother, right? If you're in a certain neighborhood, it's hey, bro. It depends what it is, but it's all the same idea. You get that close connection. When Yaakov was saying, he's saying, hey, what's going on, guys? My brothers, where are you guys from? And he's basically doing it, basically giving them that first hug. And then when they get there, like, oh, that's so nice. This guy's like us. And then he gives them the rebuke in a very gentle way. It's like, oh, what are you guys doing here? It's pretty early. Like, why are you still over here? That's how you give the rebuke. And the Chotz Tzaddikim says you give the rebuke first very calmly and nicely and gently. And it comes out of that it should know that it's coming out of love and not out of like annoyance or something like that. The idea is also, how to give rebuke. But before we do this, I want to, many years ago, had a very interesting situation that happened to me. I was walking the street, and it was Shabbat day, and I met a guy that I knew for quite some time, and he was religious and then he became not religious. So I started speaking to him, about Shabbat, about all these things, become more religious, and whatever he's speaking, he was basically not really that interested. So I said, you know what, I invited him up to my house, we had a few l'chaim, and we're talking again, and whatever, we're getting somewhere. He says, okay, maybe we'll learn, okay, whatever. And then he says, listen, he has to run. I says, no problem, I'll walk you out. I walk him out, and I walk him actually like 2 blocks. And I see, as we turn the corner from my block for where I live, I see his hand slowly get up to his yarmulke. He's got one of those paper ones. And, he slowly, puts it, takes it up and puts it in his pocket. Okay, I don't say anything. I keep on walking. Suddenly I hear a sound like this. He's packing his cigarettes on Shabbat. And he's sitting in front of me. We stop for a second, and he takes out a cigarette, and he's about to light it. And he had a few shots in my house. So I'm like, well, this guy's got to be kidding me. I'm like, all right, you want to do this? Let's two can play that game. He starts putting it up in his mouth. So I take my hand and I put it down. But I do it in a way, it was a little drunk. So I do it in a way, and then I do it, and then I ask him another question quickly, so he doesn't realize what happened. And he goes, and I threw him off, and then he remembers he still has a cigarette in his hand. He's like, oh, what? And he puts it up again. The same thing. I take his hand down. This happened probably 5 or 6 times. Finally, after the 6th time,
He didn't say anything?
Didn't say anything. He didn't get anything at all.
Weird.
After the 6th time, he's like, bro. He's like, dude. He's like, I need to smoke. What are you doing? So then I told him, and I looked him in his face, and I said, and I said the most nicest way. I said, please, I'm begging you. It hurts me so much when you break Shabbat. It hurts me so. It's going to hurt me so much to see you smoke on Shabbat. I'm begging you, please, just for me, don't do it in front of me. And he says, no problem. He puts the thing in a cigarette and the thing, and didn't smoke for the remainder of the time.
Wow.
You see over here, once I went in a nice way, and I went very calm, knowing that I cared about him. Because if it comes out of love, then it goes into love. And a person, if you know how to, you say it in a nice way and a respectful way, I guarantee you that when you're going to somebody and you really mean something, it's going to go a lot more and be like, Shabbat, you got to keep Shabbat. No, shrimp, not kosher. Come on, you want to go to hell? Hell's hot. It's very hot. It's not going to be like, all right, thank you very much. Rebbetzin, please, why don't you, go bake some challah. But rather, if you say, I care about you so much, it really hurts me when you're doing this. Please, why don't you try? Let's do it together. So that's the idea, the way that it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to done out of kindness and out of the good of your heart, out of the love that you have for the other person. This is also like, give you some tips on how to give rebuke. By the way, this you could use as the same idea to give criticism. Not that you should dish out criticism. I'm talking about, let's say, whatever. The same tips work as well. Number one, the most important thing is you don't rebuke the person, you rebuke the action. Because what happens is that if you go and you say, oh, come on, you're such a fool. What do you keep on doing the same stupid things? Come on, man. When you're doing that, you're basically just putting that person down. And what happens when you put that person down? There's a defense that shoots right up. And be like, blank, deflect everything that you say. But if you go and you say, like, listen, you're such a great guy. You're such a, why are you doing this? Maybe you could do this a little better. If you rebuke the action as opposed to the person, you'll go 1,000 times further than rebuking the actual person. The next is very important. Do not give it when you're angry. So this depends, because sometimes if, let's say, a person is about to sin, then you have to stop it. Then you have to stop it right then and there. But let's say it's somebody that sinned yesterday, and you heard about it, and you want to go talk to the person, but you just had a bad day at the office or whatever. The kids are driving you crazy, and you get out and be like, all right, this person's gonna get it. Like, all right, crack all the bones in your body and be like, you're a sinner. Don't, if you're in a bad mood, if you're angry, do not rebuke at that point in time. Also, when you critique, when you give rebuke, give something that they could actually change. Don't give something that that they're not going to change. You'd be like, whatever it is, it has to be something that's very particular. It doesn't have to be simple. It could be, even if it's a complex, it doesn't matter. But it has to be something that's changeable. Not something that they'll be like, oh, yeah, and your in-laws, oh, what is that? Doesn't do anything. Oh, you're going to change in-laws now? I'm going to go to in-laws or swipe to get the new in-laws. So do something that is actually being able to be changed and be specific about it. As specific as you can be. And also, this is also important. If let's say you're the receiving end of the rebuke, this is very important. What people do is when people get rebuked, it's a shield that blocks up, and they're like, you know what? And everything they say, they just deflect and bounce back. The problem is most people do not know how to give rebuke, and they give rebuke in a very, very bad way. What you have to know, is to give rebuke, is when you are accepting a rebuke, is to take away all that fluff around there, all that anger around it, and get at the message. What are they saying? They could be screaming about like 10 minutes, but they're focusing on one thing. Just get rid of all the other thing. Don't take it personally. And take what it is. Think of it as free therapy. People go to therapists and they'll pay, hundreds of dollars, tell me what I'm doing wrong. What is it called? A life coach. Let me have a better, here you got free. Here's the guy's dishing it out for you for free. Think of it as free therapy. They're telling you what you can work on, and do that. That's why I also want to bring this point up, that if anybody has any critique on any of my classes, I welcome critique all the time. I do. And people give me, and I thank them. I had one guy that gave me an actual, he called, I called him up, and he's like, something, and he felt like, he was like apologizing 10,000 times, and I'm like, I don't know why you're apologizing. It's like, just say it. I need this stuff. So he's like, oh, okay, and he started telling me something, and I was like, this is awesome, thank you so much. I'm like, don't be embarrassed. This is why I need to hear, because I need to know. You can always improve. You can always become better. And except for one thing, and I gotta, everyone tells me this, and I'm sorry, it's just not gonna happen. Speak slower. I get that all the time. Speak slower. I try. This is slower. This is a slower. You should see how I used to speak. There's one guy. I have a guy that comes into one of my classes. He's an older guy, Russian-speaking guy. He comes up to me, he's like, please, speak so slower. He says, I only understand 1 word of every 5 words that you're saying. I'm like, I'm sorry, I try. This is slower. So that besides that, anything else, I welcome. So please. Because otherwise, how are you going to learn? Everyone's like, everyone says everything's great, you're never going to change. So this idea also is General Dwight Eisenhower, when he made a plan, and he would go to his critics and say, tell me what you think about the plan. And of course, his critics are going to just tear the entire thing apart. So that his advisors go to him and says, why do you go to bring it to us? Why do you bring it to your critics? They tear everything apart. And he says, exactly what I need. He says, I'm doing a plan. I'm bringing people into war. I need to know all the mistakes that they see in it. I don't need you guys. You're a bunch of yes men. They're going to tell me everything's yes, everything's great. I need to know what's a problem so I can fix it. And that's the idea in life. If we have a problem, we have to know how to fix it. And we have to constantly work and grow. If someone's giving you critique, think of it. First of all, realize that it's coming from God. That guy's just a messenger. He might be a bad messenger, very likely. It doesn't know how to deliver the message, probably. But at the same time, figure out what's the underlying message and being able to accept it. Now this, was when I was starting to speak years ago, I was trying to think about what would be my method, if I may. So I was thinking, there's a strict method. We tell everybody in the face exactly what it is. Forget about all the fluff and just tell you're doing wrong, you're doing right, whatever it is, straight out. And then there is, the nice way, the coochie coochie coo way, where everything's great, God's gonna love you. Keep Shabbat if you can, please, I'm begging you. So I was thinking about it, and then I was bouncing back and forth, and then one time I went over to a guy. We had a long conversation. The guy wasn't keeping Shabbat, and I spoke to him for a long time. But I went all out, all cards on the table, one after another. Literally, if you don't keep Shabbat, it's worse than a murderer. This is bad. It's a source of all blessing. Bam, 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 one after another. That afterwards I was like, all right, let's see what happens. He said thank you, and he left. He comes back over to me a few months later. He kept on coming to some of the classes, and he comes over to a few months later. He comes to me after the class, and he says, Rabbi, I just want to let you know that I've been keeping Shabbat for the past few months, and I want to say thank you. It's all to you. So I'm like, by the way, I also welcome that type. That's also, you also say something. So, but I say that's awesome. But tell me, I'm asking you, what made you change? What is it that I said? I know that it helped by you. Maybe it can help other people. So he said, to be honest, it says is that when you told me like it is. It says, you told me things that no one else told me before. It says, when you said it that way, I realized that I didn't really have a choice. And I said, you know what? I got to do it. And I go over to him, I'm like, thank you. I started screaming at him, thank you. That's awesome. That's what I've been telling everybody all along. And you're a proof of that. Just goes, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. I don't know. But this is the idea. It says that when you tell the people, they actually change. If you coochie-coo them, they're not going to really change that much. They're going to be like, oh, okay, fine, thank you very much. I'll think about it. I speak at some, Baruch Hashem, I get to speak at different venues, different places. So one place that I was speaking at, I was speaking to the rabbi beforehand, about the methods and things like that. And he was like, no, our method over here is very nice and very calm, basically the opposite of how I deal. So I said, okay, very nice. Obviously I didn't listen. I did it my own way. But when I was giving classes over there, I was so surprised how when I said things, people were so shocked. I can't even say it over here in front of the camera what I was saying and what they were shocked by what I said, that they didn't know that it was asur. I'm like, you've been coming to classes for how long and you don't know this? Oh, I can't say it on the camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Tell us later.
So. But the idea is when you tell it to somebody straight out, it goes a long way. I'll tell you something very interesting that happened very recently to me. I was telling you earlier, I get, Baruch Hashem, I get a lot of emails that people try to convert me to Christianity. So, from all these missionaries. So, I I have time for it. But, it's actually messages from Facebook is where I get them. And again, I'm very against Facebook. I hate Facebook. Nobody should go on Facebook. But I have Facebook. So, but I only have it for the reason because people tell me it reaches tons of other people, and it really does. So, but at the same token, don't go on it. There are many broken marriages just from that. But the idea is that so I had somebody recently that. It's actually right when I started it was so the guy was trying to convert me, showing me all the verses, and this is something that I said I really don't understand. I was mentioning it to you earlier, and I think I mentioned also in one of my previous classes. Don't try to convert somebody who knows what they're talking about, because that's stupid. That you convert somebody about somebody who doesn't know anything about Judaism, then it'll be like, okay, Christianity is right, and maybe they'll get it. You go to somebody who knows what he's talking about. Not that I want to give tips to all these Christian missionaries, but the idea is it's foolish. They go for the route. I know what I'm talking about. Why are you going to? And I had a conversation about this guy. There was one guy who. I was telling you, we posted up the Xmas share on is a Christianity Avodah Zarah. So we posted it up. One guy kept on trying to show everybody that the Torah is proving Christianity, and he's bringing verses from the Torah, and he's doing that. And so I listed like 7 things, you're wrong because blah 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 blah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of the things was, I said, listen. I said, the Torah has been in my generation, in my family, for 3,300 years. You came into the picture, the Christianity, 1,900 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Says. And I asked him, do you know how to read Hebrew? Because he's quoting me verses in Hebrew. So he says, not really, I'm still learning. I'm thinking like that. I'm like, okay, do me a favor. I read Hebrew, I speak Hebrew, I deal with that. I'm like, don't come into my house and tell me where my kitchen is. I know where my kitchen is. He said, don't come to my Torah and tell me what the Torah means. So, Alma means a virgin and this and that. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Everything you said is wrong because you don't know how to interpret things. They misinterpret everything. He said, don't come into my house and tell me what is wrong. So anyway, so I had this. So this one guy was trying to convert me. He's like, oh, so it's here. So usually in the beginning I was very nice. I'm like, no, it doesn't. I was like, I hope they would just stop that. And finally, he kept on asking me questions. I'm like, you know what? Fine. It pushed me to the corner. Usually I just ignore it, but for some reason I was in the mood. And I just went at it. I said, you want the truth? And I said, and I went like strong. I'm like, yeah, the messages. And I was like, I actually even have the transcription over here. So I have part of it. So I told him straight out, I said, Christianity is Avodah Zarah. And if you do it, you're an idol worship. And I'm just going to tell you, idol worship is not a good thing to be. And one after another, proving how everything's wrong. And then I'm like thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what, probably shouldn't send it. Then I was like, quickly send it before I change my mind. And it went. So it sends, and I'm like, you know what, this guy's not going to bother me anymore. And I'm like, there's no way that he's going to come back. No. Oh, okay. Messianic. He was considered Messianic Jewish, which means not Jewish. Mm-hmm. So they
So how did he know Hebrew?
They learn it. No. From like Africa or something. So so he goes. I have a lot of those. So, but some of them are righteous. Some of them are righteous Noahide. I have one guy in Africa that always asks me questions. He wants to convert from Guyana. I don't know where it is. I don't know how to pronounce it. Wow. But he's mamash. He's trying to convince his friends that Christianity is false, and they tell him, and he's like, my friends told me this. What should I answer back to them? So he's a young kid. It's very nice, very very good. I have a few of them. Not only one. There's a few of them from that place. There's not just one. I have maybe 3 or 4.
How do they find you?
Facebook, online. I don't know. I don't go looking for them. I'll tell you that much. But they come viral and they find me. So, anyways, So I'm messaging this guy, and I send him this really harsh, like straight up to the point, it's idol worship, or, whatever it is, everything straight up. And I'm like, all right, now he's not going to bother me. 2 days later, I don't check my message every day. I check it a few times a week. So 2 days later, I open it up, and there's a message from him. I'm like, oh, all right. So this guy's coming for more. So I open up the message. I'm going to read it for you. I'm going to read it. I'm going to quote it. I'm going to quote it. Where is this? Here we go. And it reads like this. It says, I see that you're right, and I see that I am in a false way. What should I do? I just fell off my chair. I called my wife. I'm like, can you read that? He says, oh wow, I see that you're right, what you said, and everything that you said, and I see that I'm wrong what I'm doing. Yeah. And it says, so what should I do now? And I'm like, I had this conversation, not that long, not that many back and forths, and I'm able to convince him. I'm trying to convince Jews to keep Shabbat for who knows how long, and there we go, one guy, it was amazing. And so it depends on the neshama. Some people neshama, they open up right away, some people it takes them harder. But anyways, this guy, he was 1, 2, 3, and everything. I said it the way it was, and he completely changed. And I said, keep, I actually told him, I said, keep the 7 laws of Noach, which actually I told many people that believe in that. I tell them, you have to just keep the 7 laws of Noach and the few, whatever, the common ones, and he said, okay, and then he messaged me back a few days later. It says, what about Shabbat? They always ask about Shabbat. They always come back for Shabbat. And I'm like, you're not allowed to keep Shabbat. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. Chayav mita. You're not allowed to keep Shabbat. So he messaged me back a few days later. It says, and they all, the same thing. It's like the same answers, the same people, the same thing. It's like exactly the same. They all say the same thing. It says, I can't. I need to keep Shabbat. And I said, you're not allowed to keep Shabbat. You only keep Shabbat if you convert. You're not allowed to keep Shabbat. And I'm like, they're like, I need to keep Shabbat. And I'm like, no, yeah. So it's a very interesting thing. But what do you see from here? Why am I telling you these stories? These stories show that when you tell people straight up the way that it is, in their face, they actually listen. It works. I know, I see it myself. I've tried the nice kuchi kuchi ku way. Guess what? It doesn't work. I've spoken in places where they do the kuchi kuchi ku way. Yeah. Kuchi kuchi ku means like the nice little cute way. Like, no, come on, it's so nice, Yeah. So granted, but when I'm giving rebuke, I give it in a very respectful manner. You don't put it in their face like down. You do it in a very respectful manner that it has to come out, like we said, out of love, and it goes very, very far. So that's why the Kav Yashar in chapter 62 says that it says, hocheach tochiach, it says hocheach, rebuke, in a very broad sense. And then tochiach is more, now you shall rebuke. So he says the way that you rebuke it first is you do it first impersonal, like completely impersonal, like, oh, by the way, guys, Shabbat and so on, like not even mentioning to that person. The person doesn't get the point, then you go already into second person. Be like, and you keep on getting closer and closer until you get to that. And this is why I've told people, and this actually worked, and I've had this happen, numerous times, where somebody calls me up before a class, and says, listen, I'm bringing a guy over, he has this problem, can you please speak about that? I said, not a problem. And he brings it they go to the class, I speak about exactly the problem that he does it, and he doesn't think he just happened to come to the thing that he has an issue with. And you know what, not once, but numerous times that people come back to me and said, you know what, that actually worked. Because he doesn't think that I'm giving rebuke to him, so there's no defense against it. And it's just, it's just very open. It's just very open, and they're able to accept it the same way. So there is also now here's an interesting question: is can you rebuke publicly? So most people right away when I say this, they'll say absolutely not. Oh, embarrassment. Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah 239, also 240. It says that first you have to rebuke gently, and you have to compliment them and rebuke them privately. But let's say they don't stop. They keep on sinning, and they keep on sinning, and they keep on sinning. Under certain circumstances, you can rebuke them in public and embarrass them, and show the sin out to everybody that they're doing something wrong.
What are those circumstances?
So that you have to ask a rabbi, because we're not going to go through all the details in it, and for certain reason. But by the way, it's not only the Sefer Chinuch, the Rambam, the Sefer Ayah, the Shari Tshuva, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, all bring down that there's certain times that you could actually rebuke a person publicly. You could actually do that. Now, I strongly recommend you don't decide this on your own intuition, but speak to a rabbi, because if it's not so simple if you embarrass somebody in publicly. And in fact, if you embarrass somebody in publicly, it says first of all that type of person doesn't leave hell. Stays there for a really long time. And not only that, it's considered like bloodshed, because when you are rebuking somebody, the blood, first they turn like white. What it means is white. The blood literally leaves them, and then it comes back, and then it gets red. So it's literally like you're shedding blood. And there's many bad things about people that embarrass people in public. So I don't recommend it, and I don't recommend you doing it. But know that there is circumstances where one can't do that. And if you think, you tried, then it's the last situation. You first try nicely, you first try this, you first try that, you first try that. If it doesn't work, then you go into the more serious matter. But again, speak to your local Orthodox rabbi to make sure what you're doing is right. Question, yeah?
Imagine someone doing a bad thing and they're doing the same thing. Should I still give them rebuke?
Oh, we're going to speak about that in 2 minutes. Very good. Yes. So before we go that, there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 101b, that says that Yeravam was a wicked king. He was a choteh u'machtit harabim. He used to make other people sin. But he became king. So the Gemara asks the questions, how did he merit to become king? So the answer is because he rebuked Shlomo HaMelech. He rebuked King Solomon. So they ask the question, so why was he punished? And the answer is because he rebuked him in public. So the obvious question is, wait a minute, I just told you that you are allowed to rebuke in public. So why did he get punished for rebuking in public? And Rashi answers over there, it says, you know why? It says because he rebuked in public levaishai, to embarrass him. He wanted to embarrass him. That was his source. It says, that you're getting punished for that. When you're rebuking in public, it's not something that you want to embarrass him. It's because it's a last resort and you can't reach anything else, and there's certain circumstances that deal with that. But just to rebuke someone in public is a very, very serious thing, and it's something that you have to actually also be very, very careful about. And in fact, there is the Kaveh Yashab brings them down that says, and this is very important also, that I think people that give classes and speak in public, they need to read this Kaveh Yashab in chapter 101. He says that there are people that give rebuke in public and they don't do it the right way. They embarrass people and they don't know the seriousness of their punishment. They're rebuking it. Not only that, he also goes on and he says that in Kaveh Yashab chapter 43, he says that they rebuke them and they bring judgment upon the Jewish nation. If they don't do it the right way, it's very bad. I strongly recommend that we don't have the time to look into those sources, but chapter 43 and 101 in the Kaveh Yashab, to look into those things. But for those people that give the rashot and rebuke actually people in public, yeah.
Can you not rebuke, but just be like an example, meaning when people see you doing a certain thing.
We're going to speak about that also.
Without you saying anything, they'll just say it's without doing it, you're just living a certain way.
So
Consider
I don't know if it considers rebuke.
Sometimes people are not ready for things. Let's say when you're a teacher, you can't just tell your class.
Yeah, you're right.
There's
right.
levels of when a child's ready
So
for things.
all those things I'll answer, and the question I'll ask is, what if they're not going to listen? Do you have to give rebuke?
Well, then it's gonna worsen their sin.
Right. Oh, very good. We'll speak about that also.
So it's there's someone I can't even rebuke him. I can't say anything because it's like.
We'll speak about that. We'll speak about that particular thing. But before we get that, so I'll answer your question in a minute or so. But before we get to that, I want to answer one point that you did bring up that was really good. Was can you lead by example? And this is very, very important because what happens is there was a guy who was sitting next to a rabbi and he was doing a sin. And it was on a plane or a train or something like that. And the rabbi didn't say anything because he was too involved in his own issues. The guy goes off the plane and the train and says, the rabbi didn't say anything to me. He kept on doing the sin. Finally, someone went over to him and says, hey, you can't do that. That's a sin. So what are you talking about? I did it right next to the biggest rabbi. He didn't say a word to me. I said, of course I could do it. So people take it by a certain manner that, if the rabbi didn't say anything to you, so then it's okay. There's a certain store actually in, I can't say where it is. It's a modern Orthodox community.
How is he obligated to say it to a complete stranger? For all he knows, the stranger is Tinok Shirishpat.
No, so I don't know what the situation was. Well, right, you're right. But people take it and now this story will prove it to the point a little bit more. There's a certain store in a modern place where there's maybe a few items that are kosher in the store. Everything else is not kosher. So you have people go into the store and they buy the kosher items. Well, what happens when you see somebody who goes with a kippah and he goes into this store and he buys, let's say, one cake is kosher or something like that. One particular thing is a very odd store. So people go in there and they assume that everything. Look at the guy with the kippah went over there. Of course it's kosher. They go and they buy everything in the store. And there's a certain store that I know in a certain place that people go and they buy things that are not kosher, but they think that it's kosher.
That happens, man.
They don't know.
That happens, man. Are we not allowed to wear these stores?
No, so you can depending on the certain circumstances.
I went somewhere and they have kosher things. Everything's legit kosher. It's
Right.
a kosher store. Everyone goes there, and they were selling a certain thing that wasn't under supervision. Now it's okay. So I'd rather not say.
No, don't say. Yeah.
But I went because my friend.
You saw it, yeah.
I saw, and then I went, and someone else assumed. That
Right, exactly. It's all a domino effect.
So I'm like, oh my god, and then right after I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. This is that. That's the problem because people. That is why people lead by example. It's very scary.
So bad.
Okay.
So just quickly, we're allowed to go into a non-kosher grocery store?
You are, when things are obvious that if it's kosher or not kosher, like let's say you go to ShopRite. ShopRite, there's a kosher and non-kosher section. You're allowed to go shop over there. People have to be a fool to do it, but this particular store was very different because there was no packaging. Everything was open and something very particular that was kosher, and that is very dangerous.
Okay, but like a regular.
I'm not saying halakha, by the way. I'm not saying that's
like a market that has no kosher aisle, but they have stuff that's kosher. You go and you buy some produce, you buy some things.
I don't think that's not a problem because that usually has marks on them that it's kosher.
Yeah.
There's certain things that this one was not. It was a very specific case, so I don't want to. This is not a halakha for all the cases, but this particular case it was that issue. Okay. Now there are people that say like this. There are people that say we have to hurry up because it's running late. So. But don't apologize. Ask all the questions, please. The people say that we don't know how to give rebuke nowadays. So if we don't know how to give rebuke nowadays, we don't have to do it. Do they have a right in what they're saying? So there's Agma in Eruchim, page 16b, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said, I would be amazed, I'm unquoted, I would be amazed if there's anyone in this generation that knows how to rebuke properly. That's what he's saying in those days. So they're thinking, you know what, if he says that big rabbi, how could I rebuke somebody? How could I do that? So what happens is that people usually don't look into things. People just hear it, take it as face value. But if you look into it, Rashi, the Kav HaYashar, also actually explains it this way. It seems to explain it this way that what's it referring to is referring to rebuking in public. Who knows if we have someone rebuke in public and not embarrass somebody in public nowadays? But if the obvious question is, it says the Gemara was written over there. The Ramban, the Rambam, the Shara Tshuva, the Sefer HaChinuch, all the Mefarshim, all the halakha says that you do have to give rebuke. So if you do have to give rebuke, the halakha still stands. It's not something that existed only in times of the Tanaim or Amoraim. So you do have to give a what's it called, rebuke nowadays. Now the question is, before we get into the question that everyone asks, the question is we have to ask is, who do you have to give rebuke to? Do you have to just go run into everybody? So we said, it says, what's amitecha? What's your friend? So you have a few things. You have achicha. Achicha is your brother. Reacha is your friend. What's amitecha? So to understand amitecha is really someone like you. Someone similar like you. So now, in order to answer that, we'll go to the Biur Halacha, which says that, let's say there's some guy who sins rebelliously, which means is he has a kosher steak and a non-kosher steak. And he says, you know what? He says, I'm going to go and eat the non-kosher steak just to stick it. That type of person who sins rebelliously, to rebel against God, you don't have an obligation to rebuke. But he even explains, Rav Chana Wasserman goes and explains, and he says, you know what? He says, even those type of people, if you could give rebuke, you should give rebuke, if you can. So he says like this. He says that the idea from here is that also, I've heard this interpretation, I haven't seen it inside, where if it's somebody like, let's say you know somebody, then you have to, if you see a stranger you never met before and start giving rebuke, they'll probably think that you're crazy and you're probably not going to listen to anyway. And so I've heard, again, I haven't seen it inside, that there's an interpretation of that. But in general, if there's something that you have the ability to say something and you could say it, by all means do it. And nowadays, it's very easy. Let's say you feel like you're the type of person that you can't say it. You cannot go and start giving rebuke. Very simple. You take your phone, you go to TorahAnytime.com, you find a lecture, whatever they need to do. There's like 30,000, 40,000 lectures they have over there. They have something on every topic. You find the lecture, you send it to them. You send them a shiur Torah, you take a CD, you take a disc from certain rabbis that go, and you give it to them and say, listen to this, it's really good. That's already, you're doing something. That's already, you're already giving rebuke. You're already showing them. If you're not the one who's able to say it, at least, present them the opportunity to hear it. So, but the idea is if somebody rejects the Torah, he rejects it and he sins rebelliously, you don't have to go and chase after that type of person. Now, this is probably one of the most important part. What happens if you know that they're not going to listen? You're going to give them. You said these people, they're not going to listen to me. So there is an idea that it's better if, let's say, someone's going to sin. And it's better for him to sin by mistake, which it's called b'shogeg, not on purpose, than to sin on purpose, because it's a much serious thing if he sins on purpose. So better not to tell him, because then if you tell him he's going to sin on purpose, it's going to turn the shogeg to a mezid. It's going to turn into something that he did by mistake to on purpose. So people use that excuse a lot, and they say, listen, they're probably not going to listen anyways, so you know what, I'm not even going to say anything. But the idea is over here, it says if you know that they're not going to listen, which means is 100%. Which means if it's 99%, you have an obligation still. Because how do you know maybe it's not going to work? There's many times that I told people, I was actually really surprised that I used to scream about certain topics, about certain things, and the people that I thought would never listen are the ones that listen. So you'd be really surprised who actually listens and who actually, where it actually goes through.
Rabbi, do we have an obligation to rebuke our parents for certain things?
You have to be careful on that. You have to be careful on that. Whole other topic. Whole other topic. Better to give them I'll give you an example.
Because they think they know better than their child.
Yeah, I give you a good example. What I told somebody is I know somebody who their parents are, they sort of believe also in JC. I don't know what you call it. They sort of believe in everything. Like all religions welcome type of thing. So they were asking me, can I go and tell them, not to, it's not allowed. Excuse me. So I told them what the easiest way for you to do is call it a movie night. You get a DVD. There's Rabbi Mizrahi has the debate or something like that.
Oh my gosh, 3 hours.
I say take them in, or Torah and Science. There's also very good videos. You take them in and that, and call it a movie night as a family. Watch it together. This way the rabbi is rebuking them without even them realizing it, and then he'll just show them what it is. So it's a sort of an easy roundabout way of you're going on a long family road trip with it. It says, oh, I listened to this class. It's really good. Please, let's listen to it. So it's an easy way to actually give rebuke. But you have to be very careful now, and it's a case-by-case situation. How you do it, make sure it's kibbud aim, but you have to be careful, you have to do it the right way.
So let's say
Right.
They may
a
not
small
understand.
thing, like a halacha, a Shabbat halacha, let's say, right? Something to do with how to heat up food. So let's say I'll tell my mom, and she might take it fine, or she might get annoyed, and be like,
right. So
don't
I guarantee you,
don't
first of
tell
all,
me how to do everything.
so number one is it changes a lot the way you say it. If you say like this, Mom, that's asur, and we're trying to keep Shabbat over here, she'll be like, thank you very much, little princess, go to your room, play with your dolls. But if you go to her, and it's a little bit hard to say this because you put yourself in a vulnerable situation, and you go and says, listen, Mom, Shabbat is so important. I really mean it so seriously. It would mean the world to me. It would mean so much to me if I'm just asking you, please, as a favor to me, if you could just please, at least when I'm around, just do it. I'm really begging you. When you present it that way, different ball game. When a child goes to a parent and asks as a beg, what's the parent not going to do for the child? Parents can do anything for the child. And if a child really asks the nice way and the really begging way, it changes the world. The problem is that most people, the way they say it is I just learned the rabbi said, I'll do it. Oh, come on, I want to see you in heaven also. Things like that. It's not going to help. It's going to put them down. But if you come from a very vulnerable place, the parents they're going to break down. They're going to do whatever you want.
And if you say it once,
want a pony? I'm just kidding. No,
it's okay. If you say it once and they don't change, are you required to keep saying it?
The obligation's still alive, but
Is it
again,
the same with everyone else?
it's different. It's different because there's kibbud aim involved, and it has to be done in a very, very right way. Case by case, you have to speak to the rabbi on what you should do in certain situations. Okay. But now there was something that I wanted to. Oh, the idea is like this. The idea, as I always said, is let's say that that person's not going to. The person's not going to listen. So if the person's not going to listen, the halakha is that you could tell them something. Let's say, first of all, we never know 100%. But the idea of making someone a shogeg or mezid, when does that apply? That applies if there's something explicit in the Torah. Something that it's very openly states that it's asur, and everybody knows that it's asur, like Shabbat. You don't have to be worried that you're changing somebody from doing something by accident to by mistake, because everybody knows about it, so you could say it again. But let's say it's something like bolel, or how to make tea on Shabbat, or something that people don't really know, and they're not going to listen, so that case it's better not to say it, because they actually really don't know about it, and they're not going to listen anyways. But that, again, is only when they're not going to listen. If it's a possibility that they're going to listen, you still have the obligation to say it. And again, it puts yourself in a vulnerable place when you go there and you open up to them in a certain way. You're going to see wonders. Things change a lot.
Are you allowed to scare people?
You can't exaggerate it. You can't exaggerate anything, but you could say it if there's halakha. Say it like it is. You can.
There was a rabbi that imagine you told someone start keeping Shabbat, and they're like, no. So you used to open the Sefer Torah and start praying that they should go to hell.
I don't know about that.
People used to get so scared and start doing it.
Oh, you mean like that?
Oh yeah, I heard that.
And he's a big rabbi, everyone knows it.
Right.
He did that.
I'm sure there's more to that story also, though. So, but you have to be careful. If there's a big rabbi, then he probably knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't question it. But you have to tread carefully over there. There's a Gemara. By the way, this thing that better. It's a saying in a Gemara in Yevamot that says in 65 Yevamot 65b that says it's better. Let me quote a few. Just as people are commanded to say something that they will listen to, so too you're commanded not to say something that they're not going to listen to. So you better not say it. But when does this apply? This applies only, and again, the Rambam brings down only when you know for sure that they're not going to listen to. If you still, you still have an obligation. This is why, by the destruction of the temple, the tzaddikim, the righteous people, they're the first ones to be punished because they had the ability to say something and they didn't say anything. So it's a very, very serious idea behind it that needs to be brought out into the public. There's another interesting question: what about if it's your boss? Do you have to be like in there? If it's financially going to hurt you, do you have an obligation to rebuke somebody? So the Ramah brings down, it says that a person does not, if it's you don't have to rebuke somebody if it's going to hurt you financially or physically. So you have to, if it's something like that, you don't have to. I remember reading a Gemara somewhere, and I don't remember where it was, maybe Sotal or something like that. That if you do it, though, you're not going to lose out. But the same idea, the actual halacha is you don't have to.
What if you just feel uncomfortable? Like I just don't want to. I don't feel it's my place. I don't feel.
First of all, Judaism doesn't always have to be comfortable. Granted, if it's not your place, the easy way to do is give them a CD. Listen to this CD lecture.
Point someone else to do it.
Or point someone else to do it to help. When there's a will, there's a way. Put it that way. And I'll tell you like this: if let's say somebody would offer you that building on Wall Street or something, if you do that, you'll find a way to do it. So
Sometimes people are just not ready for certain steps. Like they're working. Like I'm working on this. I can't work on everything. So I'm,
Right. So you're right. And so again, you have to judge case by case situation. But the idea, it still stands. Like let's say somebody just started. He just heard about God and Kippur first Shabbat. You're not going to start screaming about it like everything from tzniut or for everything else. Even though it's very important. Granted, you need to. Actually, tzniut is actually one of the most important things. That's a bad example. But let's say something like making brachot or what was that? Making the tea, like something, but you work on them slowly. But the idea is that the obligation still stands. The obligation still stands, but it has to be said in the right way, and you have to know how to present it. It's all about the idea with everything is how you present it. It's how you sell anything. You want to be good in business. It's not the product so much. It is a product, but the main thing is how you sell it. Yeah. The idea is if you marketing is more important than the product itself. Because you see people buy when the iPad came out. I'm like, that is the stupidest idea that everyone had ever, like why would you want something without a keyboard, And I didn't really think it through because this is one of the most important, I remember when the first iPhone came out and I was still on my BlackBerry, I'm like, how do you type without keyboard? That's ridiculous, like you're gonna, and I was like, that's the stupidest thing. And I'm guilty, I hate keyboards now, So the idea is it's how you present something, how you sell it, and how you do that. The same idea, you give a rebuke, know how to sell it. You have to know how to sell it. You have to know how to do it. If you think about it, you'll be able to do a really good job. It's not that difficult. You think the problem is you have to sometimes you put yourself in a vulnerable position and open up to them. And when you open up to them, it's going to go very, very far.
Are you required to give rebuke on certain things that we struggle with?
Oh, next question. What happens if you have the same issue? Let's say you have the same issue. Do you have the obligation to rebuke somebody else if you have the same problem? So there's actually a Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 18a, that says, straighten out yourself and then proceed to straighten out others, which is a good method to lead by. But know that just because you're doing the same thing so you can't really rebuke them, doesn't mean that you're out of the thing. Now you have two obligations to straighten yourself out. Number one, because you have to straighten yourself out. Number two, you have the obligation to rebuke, but you can't rebuke until you straighten yourself out. But that being said, I'll say it straight out. Avenue C, the shul on Avenue C. There's a group of guys that started keeping Shabbat there. You know how they started keeping Shabbat? One guy started keeping Shabbat, and he wasn't really keeping. But how did they start? He says, "Listen, it's hard for me to do it. Let's do it together." And they got a group of guys together, and the thing is growing. Baruch Hashem. People are starting keeping Shabbat over there. It's ridiculous. People walk 30, 40 minutes in the cold to keep Shabbat over there. They go, the grocery store. They go over there. It's mamash. It's an amazing, amazing thing. But how did it start? It didn't start with one guy rebuking everybody else and say, guys, let's do it together. And a bunch of friends came together and they started keeping Shabbat. So you could always do that. You could always be upfront to that person. Instead of giving a rebuke, be like, listen, I know I have to work on it also. Let's do that. I was speaking to some guy yesterday. He was telling me, he has to, he works on, preventing making sins with the ladies. He's becoming more religious, and he says one of his friends used to tell them a lot not to make sins with the ladies, and that's how he worded it. So that's how I'm wording it. So he goes and he says, but now his friend tells it to him also. So they got each other's back, basically. So even though you're both messing up in the same issue, you can work in together, and sometimes that's more powerful than actually giving the rebuke straight head on. Good? Okay. The last thing is, also, if someone's sinning, pray for them. Pray for them. That's the biggest. And we see this in Bachot 10a that says Rab Meir had in a certain area. He had his neighbors that were causing problems for him, and he said that he started praying that they should die. And his wife Ruya said, no, don't pray that they should die. Yitamu chataim, not chotim. He says, rather pray that they should stop sinning. And he prayed that they should stop sinning, and they stopped sinning. So the idea is, is that you should definitely, pray for them that they should come find the right path. And B'ezrat Hashem, everybody should find the right path. And when you give rebuke, you should give it out of love, out of the warmest part of your heart. And I guarantee you, it goes so far. I want to do like a quick recap on all the questions that we asked in the beginning. So we'll give all the answers. The rabbi. Oh, thank you. So I'm super late. Yeah, thank you. So how do you know you have a good rabbi? You know that you have a good rabbi is if the rabbi tells you that you're doing something wrong. If you have a rabbi, right, you're driving to shul on Shabbat and the rabbi is like, oh, it's a tzaddik, a check. Whew. Thank you, man. See you on the golf course on Sunday? It's like, you got it. That's not a good rabbi. Find another rabbi. If somebody is doing something wrong and your rabbi knows about it and he's not giving you a rebuke, find a new rabbi. A good rabbi is somebody who tells you the way it is, what you're doing wrong, because then it means he cares about you and he wants you to become better. If somebody all he cares about is his pocket, then it's time to find a new rabbi. So it's very important. Sometimes you see all these strict rabbis, those are the good ones. Those are the actually good ones that they don't care. And guess what? They get the most heat from all the press, and everybody goes against them. And guess what? They don't do it for money. They don't get any money from it. They live very simple lives, and they dedicate their time to do these things. And guess what? This is what people get bashed them on. The rabbis that make jokes all the time, and do that, everyone's like, yeah, that's awesome. No one speaks bad about them. But the ones that are actually doing something good are the ones that are speaking bad. Know that those are the good ones. Those are the good ones, are the ones that wake people up. And this is also when you're listening to a class, you have a chance to go to Shiur Torah. Go to Shiur Torah. That's actually going to wake you up. Learning Torah is so important. But you learn Torah. By next week, you remember 25% of it. 2 weeks' time, you remember only the stories. You don't remember anything, but if you go to Shiur Torah that wakes you up, that shakes you up, be like, oh, now I got to change a little bit. That's not just going to change. That's going to change forever. That's going to change your whole life. Chazak u'baruch.